Can science explain everything? That's the question that the good pastor at Evidential University poses, then goes completely off the rails into irrationality and science denialism. Because that always produces good results, right? Once again, I look at Evidential University and find that, as he hides in his religious safe space talking only to believers, the pastor is trying to explain that science can't explain everything, while completely failing to present anything demonstrably real that science can't explain. Because these people want things to exist that simply do not, and they refuse to acknowledge that it's a failure of their own minds and religious systems, not a failure of science. But let's go take a look as he wonders if science can explain everything.
Does science provide all the explanation needed to understand the existence and nature of the world?
Well, that depends on what you mean. Certainly, we have objective evidence that explains that the world exists, and it often gives us an insight into the operation and perhaps even the origins of the world. And so long as we stick to that, I think we're fine. It's when we try to twist the evidence to fit other agendas, including religious agendas, that we start to run into trouble.
Science cannot explain everything.
Nor does anyone pretend that it can. But within its sphere, it seems to be doing pretty well, certainly a lot better than religion is doing at explaining anything at all.
If you assume science can explain everything, as it relates to nature and the existence of the world, you are making so many assumptions.
Says the guy who believes in an imaginary God, a belief that is based on nothing but assumptions. Because all assumptions are not created equal. Some are more valid than others, some are supported by more evidence than others, and some are more rational than others. Guess which side science tends to come down on?
And assumptions like the existence of nature and the world can be fully understood.
Clearly, nature exists. That's not an assumption, that's an observation. This is really where so many religious people go right off the rails. They can't tell the difference between evidentially based observations, where we can objectively determine that something is real through repeated observation and testing, and emotional wishful thinking, where they really want something to be true, and therefore they assume that it must be.
That the scientific methodology is enough to explain these things, but I'm not sure it can.
Then, by all means, present something that the scientific method cannot explain. Not that it hasn't explained, but that it cannot explain. Make sure you show how you know this. I suspect this is going to be a long wait.
This is going to require something more than science.
Why? Because whether you like it or not, science is the only method we currently have that can produce testable results and make confirmable predictions about the objectively real world that we all live in. And you get the religious saying that they can get those things from religion. No, they can't. Not anything that is testable, that we can demonstrate as objectively so. Only things made to cater to their emotional comfort, which really means nothing at all to the rational or skeptical.
For example, do God exist?
Not so far as the evidence shows. And this is really a problem when it comes to the irrational, because there simply is no reason to even consider the existence of their imaginary friends without some objective reason to think they might be real in the first place. There's no reason to consider anything without having something objectively real to suggest that it actually might exist. And this is where the religious have so many problems. They start with the idea of God, something to which they are emotionally attached to, but cannot be shown to be intellectually credible to believe in. Then they demand that their God must be real, but since science can't find any good reason to think that it is, the fault must be science, not their own beliefs. It's really kind of ridiculous when you stop to think about it.
Do supernatural entities, in that case God, intervene in human affairs?
You'd have to show that there is any such thing as the supernatural, which again the religious simply cannot do. This is true regardless of the supernatural claim because no one, including those who believe the supernatural is real, have any idea what the supernatural is. They can only tell you what it isn't. They don't have a single demonstrable example of anything that is supernatural that they can put forward for examination. So the question is moot until they can show that we should accept the supernatural as anything that actually exists in the real world.
These questions are important, but science won't help us answer them.
And this is where I disagree, because I don't think your questions are important. They only serve to comfort you because you're seemingly incapable of dealing with the world as it actually is instead of how you wish it was. The real world works just fine without any calls to gods or the supernatural. You just want there to be more to it. And I'm sorry, but you're just wrong.
Questions that deal with the supernatural explanation, by definition, beyond the realm of nature and hence beyond the realm of what we can study by science.
How exactly do you know that? Because all he can do is make claims without having any means whatsoever of backing them up. It's a little like saying, well, what about magic? Okay, what about it? There's no evidence to think that it's real outside of staged trickery. Just because someone really wants it to be real doesn't have any impact on whether or not it actually is. For that, you can only go to science and objective methods of determination, and there we find no reason at all to think the supernatural or magic is real. Too bad, so sad for your side. Try being more rational.
For many, such questions are matters of personal faith, spirituality, and philosophy.
And that's the problem, because personal faith means nothing to factual reality. I don't care what you believe, I care what you can prove. And if you can't prove anything, then I can simply reject your unsupported claims for lack of corroboratory evidence. Faith, whether you like it or not, is vastly inferior to science.
Moral judgment, aesthetic judgment, decisions about application of science.
I honestly don't know that you'd know science if it bit you, sorry. But from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're taking your own subjective wishful thinking and emotionally comforting blind faith and trying to figure out how you can beat science into agreeing with your irrational pre-existing beliefs. And that's not how science works.
And conclusions about the supernatural are outside the realm of science.
You're right. They are outside the realm of science. They're also outside the realm of rationality. Because again, you have no reason whatsoever for those claims to be taken seriously because you can't even tell us what it is that you're talking about or present a shred of evidence that shows that it's real.
But that doesn't mean that these realms are unimportant. In fact, domains such as ethics, aesthetics, and religion fundamentally influence human societies, and those societies interact with science.
Just because religion influences society doesn't mean religion is true. There are lots of things that influence society that are just plain stupid and wrong. Just because people want this to be true, just because people cling to primitive beliefs about how the world is, that doesn't mean that these beliefs are demonstrable or worthwhile. He's really pretending that silly superstitions ought to be respected because lots of people believe them. Well, lots of people believe astrology too, but they're all stupid.
Neither are set domains unscholarly. In fact, topics like aesthetics, theology are actively studied by philosophers, historians, and other scholars.
Big deal. I'm sure there are lots of people out there who are studying Bigfoot and alien abductions too. That doesn't make those studies worthwhile or intellectually valid. But they don't care. They have an emotional attachment to silly, irrational things, and so long as it makes them feel good, they don't care if they're believing in bullcrap. And then they try to act like we're the crazy ones.
However, questions that arise within these domains generally cannot be resolved by science.
That's because your questions are stupid. Science has answered them. It's just said that they're dumb.
Therefore, science cannot explain anything in this world, other domain.
Even though you can't tell us any demonstrable thing that science can't explain.
Can explain things better than science.
No, because you haven't actually explained anything. Making something up to do away with emotionally uncomforting reality isn't actually providing an answer. It's making a bald rationalization. That's not how intelligent people operate.
When it comes to spirituality, religion, and of course, supernatural.
3 things that you have no reason whatsoever to think exist, except within your religious delusion.
Thanks for watching. I am Kojo Sedimanti for Evidential U.
Alright, how YouTube can keep getting this so terribly wrong, I will never know. Now, he's called your city manager for Blanchette.
Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.
You know, I always feel so bad for this guy because he has no subscribers at all. I keep thinking I ought to subscribe, but since I'd only be doing it to destroy his silly beliefs, I really don't feel right about that. But the more I look at his videos, the more silly the whole thing looks, because if you simply remove the religious zealotry, the whole house of cards collapses. And this is true of all religious apologists who assert that their beliefs are right, but have no means of defending them against rationality, skepticism, or basic logical discourse. I can easily compare them to cryptozoologists or the UFO nuts because they're all doing essentially the same thing. They are starting with an irrational but emotionally comforting belief, then they're trying to explain why their belief isn't completely insane, when if you stop to look at it critically, it is. It absolutely is. But they're so blinded to their own religious insanity because it's crept into their minds and locked up their rational faculties tight when it comes to their religious beliefs. Is it any wonder that I call religion a mind poison? Because that's how it acts. It stops people who could be perfectly rational and skeptical in every other aspect of their lives, but when it comes to their faith, all of the cogs come to a grinding halt, and nothing anyone says matters so long as it makes them feel good. And that's just ridiculous and needs to stop.